Hello, my name is Bodhi, and welcome to the Kairos Collaborative. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a certain negative connotation to DID. Honestly, when it comes to public opinion, things really only seem to be getting worse. But despite the layman's opinion, no one's really able to discredit DID with any credible evidence. Because in this last decade of research, DID has really never been more credible. It's not really a debate anymore. Multiple accredited institutions, Ivy League universities, and experts in the field of psychology recognize the disorder to be real. I'm going to show you a few of the groundbreaking studies that have shifted the professional image of DID so that you can see why those up to date on the science no longer view dissociative identity disorder to be a controversial diagnosis. If we're talking dissociation in general, it's a widely recognized phenomenon, and it's present maladaptively in many different disorders. We have made strides in understanding how dissociation operates within the brain in this past decade. Researchers at Stanford have even gone as far as to map some of the brain circuit dynamics that exist while dissociation is being experienced by a patient. This discovery was made in 2020 by Dr. Carl Dissociative and his team by looking at the posteromedial cortex, which is responsible for things like episodic memory, self-processing, self-awareness, and consciousness. They were able to observe particular electrical functions which marked the subjective experience of dissociation. Using high-density probes within the brains of epileptic patients experiencing seizures, the team was able to find that the subjective experience of dissociation occurred simultaneously with an electrical impulse of about 3 Hz or 3 cycles per second. Discovering this, Dissociative managed to reproduce the experience of dissociation by administering this exact frequency to the targeted area of the brain. This information indicated not only a potential treatment target in the ion chambers through which these electrical impulses pass, but also provided empirical evidence for the experience of dissociation. So what about DID? Well, I'm willing to bet that it's nowhere near as controversial as you may think. The debate around if DID is a legitimate disorder usually boils down to the trauma model versus the fantasy model. And I'll just let you know now that the evidence is overwhelmingly in favor of one side over the other. A 2020 editorial was published by the press at Cambridge University in the British Journal of Psychiatry that looked at the plethora of both neurobiological and neurostructural evidence is published supporting DID existing as a severe form of PTSD. Within neurobiology, brain imaging was first used to discover differences in cell states in a 1985 case study and has been confirmed in independent studies repeatedly since. And in 2003, the first multi-participant stimulus-driven study was published, revealing significant differences in the cell states in response to their own vocal recordings of traumatic experiences. This study was originally performed to investigate the possible iatrogenic or therapist-caused origins of dissociative identity disorder. They did this by examining the brain scans of healthy patients which were emulating the differences in cell states which are seen in DID as compared to actual diagnosed DID patients. The results provided significant evidence for the trauma model, as actual DID participants were able to show significant differences in how they reacted to autobiographical traumatic memory, as opposed to the simulated self states in the healthy subjects, which showed absolutely no significant differences in their reactions. And when controlled to susceptibility to fantasy proneness, they were able to provide external evidence which showed that individuals with DID have about the same level of fantasy proneness as the general healthy population. This casts a lot of doubt on the whole idea that dissociative identity disorder is either iatrogenic or sociogenic in nature. And again, these results have been repeatedly validated in independent samples. In neurostructure, a smaller hippocampus is the most consistently reported neuroanatomical correlation to childhood traumatization. So Dr. Simon Shalabi and her cohorts examined the differences in the correlations in between individuals with PTSD with adult trauma, PTSD with childhood traumatization, and those with DID. They were looking specifically to test the trauma model. They found a negative correlation between hippocampal volume and childhood traumatization across all three groups. However, those with DID had the most significant correlation, and those with PTSD from adult trauma had the least significant correlation, thereby providing additional neuroanatomical evidence that DID is related to severe childhood traumatization. And these findings are kind of a big deal because you can't really fake or include your own personal bias into this kind of brain scan research. Another study, which spanned across multiple institutions, was aiming to look at neurodevelopmental differences and similarities in individuals with DID by looking at the thickness, volume, and surface area of each cortex within the brain. And it was found that individuals with DID differed from healthy controls in all three areas when it came to the temporal and optic frontal cortex. So these findings back the idea that DID brains are both a variable of neurobiological mechanisms as well as early factors like childhood traumatization. So in the studies I just mentioned, we see strong neurobiological evidence which supports both the identity and the amnesia criteria in the DSM for DID. The editorial puts it best itself, I think. Given that neurobiological and other evidence supports the trauma model for DID, it remains unclear why the etiology of DID is still controversial, because for most other major psychiatric disorders such as psychosis, the etiology is also insufficiently known, without such detrimental impact on diagnostic detection, treatment, and patients' quality of life. We, therefore, propose that given the available neurobiological evidence, it is time to move DID out of the shadows and to consider a more mainstream psychiatric diagnosis. The editorial concludes that the best evidence to further support DID would be looking at some structural brain imaging. So let's examine some. It's 2018, and Dr. Anju Reinders is looking to find whether there might be any potential biomarkers that could aid in the diagnosis of DID using the structural brain imaging of DID subjects. MRI imaging was obtained from 75 participants, 32 with genuine DID and 43 control subjects with the same or similar demographics. Half of the DID participants had no other comorbidities apart from PTSD, and other comorbidities were more randomly distributed across the rest of the participants. Using a computer program, the research team was able to differentiate between DID and non-DID brains with a 72% sensitivity and a 74% specificity. That is a level of accuracy which is comparable to what has been demonstrated for most psychiatric disorders, including psychosis. And while more research definitely needs to be done, specifically comparing PTSD with dissociative subtypes to DID, a similar study to this one, which was looking at PTSD subtypes with dissociative features, found negligible overlap to this study, which indicates that the findings in this study are likely to be DID specific. There was one more resource that I wanted to include in this video, which actually looked at some of the more professional concerns surrounding DID. But I was running low on time, so I decided to make this video more focused on colloquial issues. But if you want the answer to these questions in a very thorough and well-evidenced manner, then please visit the first link in our description, and it is addressed. So, can we stop calling DID a controversial diagnosis? Anyone who does their research and is up to date with the facts can see that DID is clearly a real psychiatric condition. Just because you can't understand something doesn't make it not real. We personally don't care if a random person believes in our diagnosis or not. But the whole idea that DID is controversial in a professional or medical sphere has prevented us from sharing our diagnosis with our own medical professionals, which has caused issues, obviously, in the efficiency of our care. Even though we know better, it's hard to get past the stigma when it's all that you hear. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you stayed for the whole thing. I know that Leo is planning on putting out a video soon that goes over where we've been and everything that's been going on with us over the last long break that we've taken. Have you ever had a professional tell you that they don't believe in DID? Tell me about your experiences and let me know your thoughts on this topic overall in the comments below. Lots of love and healing to you all. Bye!